Of course. So for more on this, let's bring in John Malcolm, because he's a vice president at the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. So, John, as a expert in the Constitution, you're also a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Do you think the FBI was using this alleged informant? Do you think it was appropriate?
Well, look, this investigation, to the extent that it was ever on the rails, is certainly threatening to come off the rails. So there was, it seems, a foreign intelligence investigation, not a criminal investigation, going on involving George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. And before a criminal investigation was initiated at the end of July, this Cambridge professor is off speaking to Papadopoulos, Carter Page, and Sam Clovis and asking questions about the Russians. This is very, very dangerous territory. So
why would that be dangerous territory? Let's say those three potentially are colluding or have information. They've all denied wrongdoing. Let's say, some would say, wouldn't the FBI have a legitimate reason to investigate this?
So FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, is designed to root out people who either wittingly or unwittingly are agents of foreign powers. And so to the extent to which you think that the Russians had actually co-opted somebody to work for them, then this is legitimate. But one, this bleeds into a criminal investigation, and it involved one of the major political parties in the heat of a political campaign. So this is fraught with political peril, and these decisions are being made by political appointees. When you add on top of that, you know, all that has come out about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and sort of an anti-Trump bias by some of the people who were leading this investigation, it becomes particularly problematic. It's still early days. We don't know whether this guy was being paid to be an FBI informant, whether he was off doing this on his own, whether he was the only one, what intelligence he was gathering. But at least if you believe what has been reported to be true, he not only approached these three people and were asking them about, you know, their contacts with the Russians, but he was offering to pay Papadopoulos a few $1,000s to write a paper.
Yeah, apparently did. He apparently sent him $3,000.
Yeah, no, that's right. And that's the kind of thing that informants do, or that frankly spies do, to try to rope in people to cooperate with them. And George Papadopoulos, it seemed like, to run at the mouth, and he found a willing person when he identified Papadopoulos as the guy to approach.
Now, Democrat Adam Schiff, congressman, is denying there's any wrongdoing here. I want to get your reaction to what he is saying about that this morning.
Sure.
This claim by the president, the suggestion by Giuliani that there is a political spy embedded in the Trump campaign is nonsense. And you hear it in the same terms that Trump often speaks, which is people are saying, or I'm hearing, or we're being told. That's another way of saying this is patently untrue, but we would like to spread it anyway.
You know, I asked Steve early this question. Is there a difference, or is it just semantics, between the FBI sending an informant to talk to the individuals like Carter Page or the campaign? Or are they both the same?
Well, in this case, these individuals had one common thread, which was they were all involved in the campaign. And while two of them you might be able to characterize as peripheral players, Papadopoulos and Carter Page, and say were voluntary advisors, you couldn't say that about Sam Clovis, who was the co-manager of the campaign. So there was no way to embed somebody into this campaign, or to have somebody snooping around this campaign without getting into the tactics of what the campaign was doing. So this was an investigation that was fraught with political peril from the beginning. Whether it was initiated to try to root out what the Russians were trying to do to interfere with the election, and it's quite clear that they did try to interfere with the election, but it was done so seemingly against one campaign and in a way that has left the FBI once more open to the charge that they have been politicized and weaponized the criminal process.
But at the same time, doesn't the Bureau and doesn't law enforcement have a duty and an obligation to protect the Constitution and to root out objectively these type of allegations?
They do. So they had to handle this kind of thing very, very delicately. They could have at some point gone and talked to the Trump campaign. They refused to do so. And now they're going to be caught in a bit of a bind, where they're going to have a president who's going to say, wait a minute, you had somebody on the FBI payroll, possibly, snooping around my campaign. Tell Congress about it so that we can find out what happened with respect to this election, lay all of the cards on the table. And the FBI is going to say, well, we have a confidential source, and we have an obligation to protect that person, even though the person's name has now been widely disclosed. So this is going to pose a standoff potentially between the president and the FBI director Chris Wray, and possibly Rod Rosenstein and Jeff Sessions.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going to happen.
And also between Congress and the officials. Here's what Devin Nunes said about that this morning. Take a listen.
Sure.
If they ran a spy ring or an informant ring and they were paying people within the Trump campaign, if any of that is true, that is an absolute red line. There is not an honest person in this country who can believe that taxpayer dollars going to fund this ring and operate like this, like what's said in the New York Times, I think it would have quite a bit of detail on it. If any of that is true, this is a red line in this country. You can't do this to political campaigns.
So how do you think this will play out this week, finally? And does the president, does he have the power to declassify all this? Doesn't he have that power?
He does. And he could also fire Bob Mueller, and he could shut down this investigation. Whether he will choose to do so and take the political hit that involves, I don't know. He has not done that to date. But asking the FBI to disclose a confidential informant is a bit of a risky business. But look, I think Devin Nunes is onto something. I mean, it's one thing to look at an individual and say they're a potential Russian spy. It's another thing to let this go on and extend the tentacles of this investigation deep into the Trump campaign. It's unclear at this stage just how deep those tentacles went, whether this one informant was the only person, whether there were others snooping around, but it's very, very dangerous, and once more has left the FBI vulnerable to attack of having been politicized.
John Malcolm, thank you for your service to the country, and thank you for your insight today.
Thank you.
Of course. Marthel?
Well, Eric, we're learning more about the mindset of the suspect accused of carrying out that deadly school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas. What court documents are